Price of oil is at $115 today. Markets are reacting to oil. Headlines are focused on the Middle East. Let's see what's going on in the market here. The Dow is down 0.7%. The Nasdaq's at 1%, down 1%. The S&P 500 is down 0.879%, just under 1%. But there's something happening underneath all this. It's a shift into what I would call a war economy. So as we look at the news, Iran war, live updates, Trump issues grave threats as U.S. strikes Kharg Island. Now, what is Kharg Island? We talked about Kharg Island yesterday. Kharg Island is an island in the middle of the Persian Gulf, where 90% of all of Iran's oil exports are shipped from. So let's see. President Trump threatened to wipe out a whole civilization. We'll see if that happens later tonight. Hopefully not. It's a little extreme. Let's go to the big names, such as, let's look at the defense. We're not talking about the big names such as the Raytheons, RTX, GE Aerospace, Lockheed Martin, 630 is down 1%. We're talking about smaller overlooked companies that suddenly become critical. And one of those companies is Ondas, ONDS. So over the past few days, we've been seeing rising tensions across the Middle East as oil prices are moving higher, markets are reacting with volatility, and global uncertainty is creeping back in. But here's the part that most people miss. Wars don't start with headlines. They start with preparation. They start with contracts and spending. Governments don't wait until things escalate. They position early. Here's the CEO of Ondas, Eric Brock, talking about how defense spending on drones is very early.
We're seeing that all day long. The military is really accelerating that because of the critical capabilities and the value it brings. We're starting to see investors say, oh, wow, there's an adoption curve. But you have to remember, we've just scratched the surface, and we're just coming out now proving that these technologies are useful and reliable. So what does that mean? It means the market is in the first inning of a multi-year, probably a decade-long adoption curve. And this is a market that's going to be very similar to a lot of the markets that your investors over time have been involved in, going back to the personal computer, say the cloud, social media, and so forth. And that informs our strategy, right? What we're trying to do is kind of take that leadership. What we're doing, actually, I'll emphasize this. This is important context. We're moving from developing the technology platforms, which has largely been venture funded, to an adoption cycle, which is growth capital, and that's where Ondas is trying to play and create competitive advantage.
Now, so right now everybody's watching the obvious: oil, gold, big defense stocks, and that makes sense, but it also creates an opportunity. Because while the market is focused on what's already moving, it completely ignores what hasn't moved yet. And historically, the biggest winners are the ones nobody is watching early. And by the time the media is talking about a company, by the time analysts are upgrading it, the move is already gone. So the real question becomes, what's being built before anyone is paying attention? So let's talk about Ondas, ONDS stock ticker, because this is where things get interesting. ONDS operates in autonomous systems and industrial drone technology, but not in the way most people think. This isn't just hobby drones or consumer tech. It's infrastructure level technology. We're talking about autonomous aerial systems, secure communications networks, surveillance and monitoring for critical environments. This is the kind of technology used in defense operations, border security, infrastructure protection, smart industrial systems. And here's the key: this type of technology becomes more valuable during global instability and not less. Because governments need visibility, they need automation, they need systems that can operate without human risk. This is not hype, this is the backbone of modern conflict. So here's where this becomes an investment story. Small companies like ONDS don't need to dominate the entire market. They don't need 50 contracts. They need one meaningful contract, one strategic partnership, maybe with Anduril. One moment where the market realizes this company matters now. And when that happens, the re-rating can be fast. Because perception changes overnight. And we've seen this before in defense, AI, and energy stocks, where a company goes from nobody cares to everyone wants exposure, and it happens fast. Now let's be real for a second, because this is important. ONDS is still a small cap company. So that means that execution risk is real, contracts are not guaranteed, and volatility is high. This is not a safe, slow-moving stock. This is a high-risk, high-upside scenario. And if they don't execute, the story falls apart. So you have to understand what you're investing in. It's not certainty. This is positioning. But here's the bigger picture. This is how early-stage defense stocks move. First, nobody talks about them, and then one contract hits. And then the narrative shifts. And suddenly everyone's trying to get in. The question is, where are we now? Because if ONDS is still in its first phases, this is where the opportunity lives. Not after the move and not after the headlines, but before. So the biggest winners are never the obvious early stocks. They always feel uncertain, overlooked, and even ignored. So the question is ONDS one of those opportunities, or is it just another small cap story that never plays out? So what do you think? Do you think ONDS lands a major contract? And what stock should I break down next? If you're tracking under the radar opportunities, make sure you subscribe and let us know what stocks you guys are tracking, because this is exactly what we're focused on. And we'll see you in the next one.